Greetings! This is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgia Catholic, with another Isaac Asimov short story review. This one is called Blank, and it has a rather interesting story behind its publication. By the way, this story is included in By Jupiter, but there's a nice little introduction I want to take a look at. It kind of explains some stuff, and then we will take a look at that. 99, okay. But I think it actually has the story on page 98 here of the hardcover, and it says, editors are always trying to think up gimmicks. Sometimes I am the victim. On November 14, 1956, I was in the office of Infinity Science Fiction, talking to the editor, Larry Shaw. We got along well together, he and I. Footnote here, I mustn't make that sound exceptional. I get along with nearly everyone. Continuing, and I often dropped in to see him when I visited New York. That day, he had an idea. He was to give me the title for a story, the least inspirational title he could think of, and I was to write a short on the spot based on that title. Then he would give the same title to two other writers, and they would do the same. I asked cautiously what the title was, and he said, Blank. Blank, I said. Blank, he said. So I thought a little and wrote the following story with the title of Blank, with an exclamation point, so he had an exclamation point. And then Randall Garrett wrote a story entitled Blank, with a question mark, and Harlan Ellison wrote one just called Blank, with no punctuation at all. So that's the story. So there's actually three stories. Needless to say, all three stories are published in this version of Infinity. And you can see here it's a special, it's blank, and it lists here the three, Isaac Asimov, by Harlan Ellison, by Randall Garrett. Having read all three of the stories, I have to say that this cover seems to be reflecting something out of the Harlan Ellison version of it. We have a very desperate criminal type person with a gun, and he's going after, and he's trying to use this girl to escape from the law. And there's all this computerized whatever it is here. I'm not sure what that is. That probably relates to how he's going to be traveling. Now, let's see what it has in here. It's Infinity Plus table of contents, and it has blank, blank question mark, and then blank. And there they are, Isaac Asimov, Randall Garrett, who actually has the second of the three is presented here, and Harlan Ellison, who gets the last. Okay, so 88, 93, and 99. Now there's actually a little bit of a start here before 88. So 87, the only opening blurb really to the story, well, no, that's not true. But there is a little opening thing here. It says, an Infinity Plus feature. Okay. Challenge to the writer, blank. So look at that. We have a picture of drawing what's supposed to be Isaac Asimov, Randall Garrett, and Harlan Ellison. And the little blurb here, I'll just read this. And it says, on the following 17 pages, we present three stories by three top writers written in answer to the most difficult challenge we could think of. The first draft of each one was written in our editorial office. Each writer was provided with the one-word title, blank. Each story, we insisted, had to fit that title and meet all the usual standards for an Infinity acceptance. Each of the three writers we invited to participate met the challenge with an excellent story, and each of them, as you will see, is quite different from the others. Here they are in their final polished versions. Be sure to let us know how you like them and the idea behind them. So, one of the things he mentions here is a little closing outro to the original story as presented here in By Jupiter. He gives kind of like a postscript to all of this. He says, all three blanks were published in the June 1957 issue of Infinity, which is what that was. And the idea of the gimmick, I suppose, was to let the reader compare them and note how three different imaginations took off from a single nondescript title. Perhaps you wish you could have all three stories here so that you could make the comparison yourself. Well, you can't. In the first place, I'd have to get permissions from Randall and from Harlan, and probably their publishers as well, but that's another bucket of bananas. He doesn't mention that. Maybe that's included. And I don't want to have to go through all that. In the second place, you underestimate my self-centered nature. I don't want their stories included with mine. Then, too, I must explain that I always dismantle magazines with my stories in them, because I just can't manage to keep intact those magazines containing my stories. There are too many magazines and not enough room. I take out my own particular stories and bind them into volumes for future reference, as in the preparation of this book. Actually, I am running out of room for the volumes. Anyway, when it came to dismantling the June 1957 Infinity, I abstracted only blank, exclamation point, i.e. his own, and discarded blank, question mark, and blank, no punctuation. Or perhaps you don't underestimate my self-centered nature and expect me as a matter of course to do that sort of thing. So, in other words, in By Jupiter, there's only his version of blank. And if you do want to see the other two, I don't know if either of the other authors have gathered their versions of blank in any collections of theirs. But at any rate, the one place you can see all three of the stories is where they originally appeared together in this issue of Infinity. So, where is that? Blank 88. Alright, so first we have Isaac Asimov's blank, and we'll discuss that in more detail in a moment. And it's kind of this first page, it kind of faces it. The idea is here's this professor type guy with some sort of computerized thing, and another guy in the background, and a little blurb, and on the top is Theo on something K, I don't know what is it, solid block there, by Isaac Asimov. So let's look at the little blurb here. And this one says, time travel involves no paradoxes at all. The machine was as safe as an elevator. Illustrated by Engel. In fact, all these three stories are illustrated by Engel. Apparently Engel seems to be the illustrator for Infinity magazine at that time. So, at any rate, you've got these two fellows. You've got August Poindexter, who's kind of the skeptic, and I don't know if I really want to go along with this. And then you've got Edward Barron, who's the inventor of all this stuff, and he's saying, oh, no, it's perfectly safe. It's like an elevator. He'd already sent rabbits back and forth through time a little bit with this thing. And so he decides to do this. So, after some discussion, they talk about hubris, and something called 8, which is, I guess Greek for hubris. You think you're so all-powerful, you challenge the gods to knock you down. And 8, ate, or whatever, however it would be pronounced, is the result that happens when the gods kind of horn in on you and say, oh, you screwed up and now we're punishing you in some way. Well, the hubris was that he thought he could just do this and go, you're 22 hours in the future. I wonder what would have happened if he'd gone for maybe only 30 seconds. But at any rate, he goes 22 hours, and apparently he managed to get Poindexter to come along with him. And, it doesn't work out as planned. And it's as if they got stuck between floors, if you will. And what that means, I'll leave that to when you read this thing. So I don't want it to be total spoiler here. But anyway, that's his version of blank. You end up in a blank situation. Well, I almost give it away. Okay. Now, Randall Garrett's version has a slightly different one. Here's a bunch of money from he's not sure where or why. He's drinking. And now he's kind of got this and he's wondering what's going on. And it says amnesia? Well, maybe. But how and where had he earned that $50,000 by Randall Garrett? So this is a case where somebody suddenly finds himself 2 weeks in the future. Apparently, somehow, the intervening time had passed. He had passed through it all. But at the same time, being in the future, he knew stuff like what would win in different contests and so forth, like horse races or whatever, and you could bet on the winner, kind of a thing. And so that's what he's doing in this story, as he tries to reconstruct what happened in those 2 weeks between when he was and when he is. And then there's another little gap where apparently there's another few days where, again, he's not sure what happened. I think it had something to do with having gone forward that time. He goes forward a little bit more, and then he returns back. I don't know. It's kind of got a time travel theme to it, but not so much. And then you have the third version of blank. Actually, it just kind of have a punctuation. It's got a blank ... by Harlan Ellison, and again, it's illustrated by Engel. And there's another blurb here. It says, "A clever man can use tools that he doesn't understand, even human tools." And I guess in this case, the woman is the human tool because she's got some kind of ability to drive some sort of craft, spacecraft, timecraft, some craft that would help him get away. There's an odd feature to all of this, is that the guy's name is Asimov. Just cut out a little here. Just cut out the KI and it's Asimov. I wonder if there's a little unconscious or maybe even conscious slight of Asimov being made here. But at any rate, Harlan Ellison was always cool with little pranks like that. At any rate, his name is Reiki Asimov, and apparently he's the most horrible criminal. He was going to be banished to prison on Io for 1,000 years, which is kind of ridiculous. You sometimes hear of these prison sentences that, oh wow, we're sending him away for 96 lifetimes or something. And I mean, he's not going to serve. He's going to die long before that, no matter what. Even if they could extend his lifespan somehow, he's not going to live 96 lifespans. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And so they want to have this guy banished to Io for 1,000 years, even though even with the extended life years going into 300 years, there's no way he's going to come anywhere near that 1,000-year limit anyway. And he says, "Oh, I'll do anything to avoid that." Well, anything, as it turns out, is involves that woman, and let's just say, we have a nice piece of artwork here pertaining to that. I guess they're seeing some of what's going on, and he's sending this guy. Well, she has an interesting idea. He actually shot off her arm, but other than that, she makes it out alive. But she's minus an arm, and she manages to get a very real, substantial revenge. It's an interesting little story, but that's not the Asimov story, and so I'm not really talking about that. You've seen the artwork that pertains. I read the blurbs and introduced briefly all three stories. It is, of course, Asimov's story that is most relevant here, and it's the only one that's included in By Jupiter or any of the other places it gets anthologized that I know of. So that would be Asimov there, who uses that woman as his tool to try to get out of being sent to Io for 1,000 years. And okay, he doesn't go to Io, but maybe he might prefer if he did. I'll just leave it at that. So Asimov's story, in other words, he had to sit down, write this thing in one sitting. He was allowed to polish it a little bit afterwards, but he had to sit down right there in the office. Here's your assignment. Take this title, turn it into a story of yay much length and other details of what we consider printable and so forth. And each of these three writers did that. They might have invited other writers who didn't come up with anything satisfactory. I'm only guessing there, I don't know. But at any rate, these three writers were given that assignment and each provided something that the Infinity Science Fiction felt was worth including. And they're good short stories, I guess. So, blank, I guess, is what happens if you go to a future that hasn't been written yet. Although he sent a rabbit to the future, and the rabbit just poof magically appeared at some point. So I'm not quite sure, but maybe he did that in a short enough duration of time that the rabbit is able to survive long enough for the present time of the Earth to catch up with where it was sent to, and there he is. A little traumatized, perhaps, but still alive. I don't know. So they had a rather interesting solution about trying to eliminate paradoxes if you want to send something back in time, and that is you can't change anything. It's not quite clear all of how that happened. Somebody tried to send the rabbit further back, but the rabbit had already appeared 1 week prior to the time they were trying to send it back. And so when that time came, when they tried to make it go 2 weeks back, I guess it just didn't work, or I don't know what went wrong. It's like they slammed up against the barrier, it wouldn't go. They could send it back 1 week to the time that in fact had appeared. So, in other words, you send something back, you're just part of. If you actually get there, you're just part of what was supposed to happen that time and day, and did happen already, and you didn't change anything. You're just part of it. That seems to be, or it doesn't let you go back at all. So that seems to be the solution to that time travel paradox. It's kind of a good one. I mean, there's whole videos out there about time travel paradoxes. So you go back and you change something, even accidentally. Now, what? You got these two timelines going parallel. One that's the original one that where you hadn't gone back, and then another one where you magically sent back in time appeared magically at some time and place and started doing things that affected events. And so you got a whole separate direction going on in parallel, and anytime further you got more and more of these branches going off ad infinitum. I don't know. It's like when you try to resolve the impossible, you end up with the ridiculous. And I think that's all that ever really proves. Anyway, that's the theme of that short story, and well, that's all I have on that one. Thanks for listening.